If you're like me, you hate taxes. You hate doing them. You hate paying them. But the more that I've done them over the years, the easier they've become. So come do taxes with me. First of all, I am no accountant, so this is not official advice. So don't come to me if the IRS doesn't like what you did. Doing taxes is actually pretty easy once you understand the basics. It's just the fact of kind of doing them that's kind of annoying and frustrating. But there's three things that you definitely need to know. The first thing is the income. This is just any type of money that you got from anyone, you should have record of it. This is called your gross income. It's called your revenue, like all the cash that comes in. The second thing is expenses. What did you spend in order to make this business run? Anything that you spent, you should have a record of it and be able to add up all those numbers. The third thing you need is an accountant. Don't try to do this on your own. Get someone to file the taxes for you, especially as you're dealing with expenses and whether things are properly expensed, all of that stuff. You need a professional to tell you what to do so that you are in compliance with the law. I start with the most exciting thing, and that is my income. I love doing that first. And what I do is I use a program called Studio Ninja. I've been using this software for 3 years now. This is specifically for photographers. It's more of a client management software than necessarily for taxes, but it's a great way to record all of your income because you're making invoices, sending it to clients, and then you're able just to go in. You go into payments, you can click export, and then boom, you can just export all the payments and all the information like when it was paid, how much, sales tax, all of that. So you're able to export all of that information as a spreadsheet, and then you can send that to your accountant. So I reached out to Studio Ninja if I could get you guys like a coupon code or something, because if you are looking for something to help your business as being a wedding photographer, dealing with clients, invoices, like all of that stuff, you should definitely check them out. They gave me a coupon code that will get you 50% off your first year with them, which is nuts. And you can find that link in the description below. So here are 2 pro tips under the income section. The first one is make sure you have your own bank account. You don't need a fancy business account if you're a sole proprietor. If you're just doing this on your own, you don't have like an LLC or something like that. It's just like a self-employment basic, business that you're running. You can even use one of those online banks that are super easy to set up. You don't have to like go into a bank and all this stuff. But it makes doing taxes, it's actually like a completely different level of ease. So separating all those transactions makes doing your taxes at the end of the year it's like on a different planet. The second thing is to set some of your income aside in order to pay taxes at the end of the year. Oh, I think I've told this story on this channel before, but my first year of doing business, I was an art student, okay? I didn't know anything about business or taxes or accounting or anything, but I got an accountant and we sat down at the end of my first year of doing weddings. And I looked him in the eye and said, how much do I get from my return? Because you get like a tax return, right? Like at the end of the year, you do your taxes, you get money back from the government. And he looked at me and he laughed. And he was like, you're joking, right? And I was like, no. He's like, Luke, you haven't paid taxes at all. Like, if you have a job, the government takes the money out of each check that you have. And what they do is actually normally take too much. So then they give you back some of your money at the end of the year. Like that's how it works. And I had no idea. So as a business owner, you have to do that for yourself. And so what I used to do was I used to take 25% off like every time I got paid. But that doesn't work when you have expenses. And we'll get into that in a bit. So what I do now is every time I pay myself, I take 25% off that. And that usually gets me at least in the ballpark of what I need in order to pay taxes every year. The second big part of doing taxes is your expenses. Now, I always get a little stressed about this every year. Something I always remind myself is Luke, you could just send in only your income for taxes. You could just send that in and say, okay, that's my tax return. You don't like just do my taxes from there. And I don't have to organize anything. I would not have to send in expenses or anything. That would be incredibly stupid if I did that. But it's just a reminder to myself that putting my expenses in, telling the government, hey, I needed to spend these things in order to make this money. It really, I don't know, it just helps me relax and being like, okay, everything that I do here helps me. And so the better job that I do at recording expenses and putting them in is going to put more money in my pocket. Oh, okay. So take a deep breath. So, okay, an illustration for you is say a couple paid me $8,000 to do their wedding, and I spent $1,000 on film, and there was also $1,000 of sales tax. So I would only get charged tax on $6,000 because that's the money that I actually made. $6,000 was for me, $1,000 was for film, $1,000 was for sales tax. Now, of course, our businesses are more complex than just getting film for your wedding to shoot, right? So if I had more expenses, I wrote some down. Like, these are not real numbers, whatever, but this is just an example. So like a website for $200, Adobe Lightroom for $200, a camera rental, maybe you needed to rent something for $400, some SD cards for $200. That would all add up to another $1,000. And so that's not $1,000 that you're making. That's $1,000 you need to spend in order to make the money that you shot the wedding with. So if I was able to record all those expenses and send them to my accountant, I would actually then get taxed on only $5,000 because I needed to spend money in order to make money, and the government only taxes you based on what you've made after all of your expenses. And so that's why it's so important to keep track of all your expenses, keep track of absolutely everything that you spend money on in order to run your business. The first pro tip is don't spend all your money just to save some money on taxes. There is a show called Schitt's Creek, and it's hilarious. And there's this one episode where one of the main characters is part of this business, and he's buying all of these things in order to use it as a tax write-off, right? And if you haven't seen the episode, it's hilarious. You should look up like tax write-offs Schitt's Creek. I'm sure there's like a clip of it. And that's kind of how I thought. Maybe not quite as extreme as that, but I was like, oh, I don't have to pay taxes, so I'm going to like spend all this money. And yes, if you have actual things to buy for your business, then of course, that's going to lower your taxable income and you should buy those things. However, I kind of used it as an excuse just to spend and spend and spend without thinking. And it turned out that I ended up just buying a lot of things that I didn't really need to spend, but I justified it because I was like, oh, this is a tax write-off. I was kind of so focused on lowering my tax bill that I wasn't focused on necessarily saving money or just having money. I just was kind of like, let's just reinvest everything that I make back into the business, which is great. It's great to reinvest, but it's also great to have some money. And the reality is, in order to have some money, in order to save some cash, you're going to get taxed on it. You know, if I spend $1,000 on something that I don't really need, I'll save maybe, I don't know, $300, $200 on taxes, but I would have to have spent $700 to save the $300. So it's like, okay, yes, I'm saving some money here, but I'm also maybe wasting some money in order to make a savings over here. So anyways, do what you want. Honestly, I just spend a lot less time focusing so much on, how to lower my taxable income. And I try to really keep my expenses as low as possible, and not try to overspend. Because ultimately, I'd rather have the cash than to just save some money on taxes. The second pro tip, and this goes very closely to what I just talked about, this is actually a pretty recent thing. I started it about 1.5 years ago, and that is I switched from using a Visa card for my business to buy most things to a Visa debit card. And that really did change things for me. It made me, I just started to think way differently when I was using a debit card for my business rather than just like putting everything on a credit card. I think for me, I was like, oh, I don't have exactly enough cash to make that purchase right now, but I'll just put it on my credit card and then I will have cash in a couple weeks or whatever. And I just found that my cash flow was way different when I used a debit card. I was so aware of how much money was coming in and how much money was going out. That when I used a credit card, I didn't really think that much. I was just like, oh yeah, I'll be able to have enough money to cover all this. It'll be fine. And I just bought things anyways. And so it's really helped me with cash flow, and it's really helped me just have a lot more money at the end of the year because I didn't spend money on things that I didn't really need. The last pro tip about expenses is receipts. What do you do with receipts? So for the most part, I get mostly electronic receipts. So anytime I can, I get an email receipt sent to my email. I put that all in a folder, and that's where all my receipts live. If I have a physical receipt, I can't deal with the receipt apps and stuff like that. So what I do is just take a photo on my phone and then put it in an album called 2024 receipts, and I just plop them in there. And then when I need receipts all at the end of the year, I can dump them all on Dropbox in a folder, and there's my receipts for all my expenses for the whole year. So the next thing I'm going to do is kind of just walk you through how I actually do my taxes. So I do it all on this spreadsheet right here. If you want to look at this spreadsheet in some more detail, you can go to the description and there is a link to where you can download it. But yeah, I'm just going to kind of walk you through. I've spent some time, doing some fancy spreadsheet things, so it works really well with me. And if you can use it for yourself, totally awesome. I did use some accounting programs in the past. I just found that they were more work for me than I needed. They were kind of more complicated than I needed. My business is pretty simple. I don't have a lot of crazy transactions. Everything's kind of the same. I don't have a ton of I'm dealing with weddings, so I don't have thousands of transactions, right? And I have found just doing it on a spreadsheet is really easy for me. Okay, so here is the spreadsheet that I use. And so these aren't real bank statements. I altered it, but this is all of my expenses. Actually, let's start with income because I love starting with income first. So here is, let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, so here is just a list of all my income. And so what I do is when I get that download from Studio Ninja, I copy and paste it and then just put it right into here. So I copy, usually a column at a time because it's typically formatted a little different. And I just copy and then paste it. I paste all the clients and the date and all that stuff. And then all I do is just add this up here. And then I have my total of how much income I have. A couple cool kind of spreadsheets things that I did that I really like is that I categorize all my income. So I go through here and I type in oh, this is a Bob and Sally's wedding. Okay, this is a wedding. Oh, these were prints and albums. Oh, this was a family shoot. And then what you can do is that this automatically finds all the wedding and then adds up, how much I made on wedding. So it says $98,000 and it says, oh, you made $7,000 from this and $3,000 from family. And you don't have to use the same categories that I do. If you change the cell from wedding to portrait or something, and you label the income types as portrait, it will find that and add it up. You just have to make sure that it's spelled exactly the same way. Make sure there's not a space after the word, and you can change these categories to whatever you want. And then it turns it into this kind of graph. So you can see, from the last year, where did I make my money? This is just a graph of what time in the year, and a couple of things like that. So it's just a fun way. I love looking at this at the end of the year. I think it's really rewarding and exciting to kind of see where your money came from and when you got it. So let's go back to the expenses real quick. Same thing. So what I do is the bank that I have, I'm actually able to download all of my transactions just with one click. It's really nice. So maybe even if you're looking into banks, see whether you're able just to download all your transactions into a spreadsheet file. And so yeah, that's what I do. And I just highlight, copy it, and then I come into this spreadsheet and I just paste each column at a time. And then the thing that takes all the time is categorizing expenses. And that's kind of the frustrating thing about doing taxes is that you need to have a record of what you spent money on for your business and then what type of expense is that. And so Here's something, like, obviously you're gonna have to change this for where you do taxes. So if you live in a certain state or a different province that has certain categories for your taxes, you can go in and change what the category says. You just have to make sure that it's spelled the exact same way in both columns. That's why I copy and paste them, or you can just type them in and use the autofill once you put it in once. These are all categories of expenses. And so what I do is, this is where I kind of spend the most time, is putting these all in, right? So I go through each one and I say, okay, oh, my Google email. Okay, it costs $15. And then I go over here and actually copy and paste it here. This is where, asking your accountant, Googling, like, what does, I bought some film from B&H Photo, okay, for $300. Okay, what category does that go under? So that takes some time to kind of figuring out which category of each thing goes in. But then what I've done is I've, put a formula in here that looks through here to see, which ones are all the advertising one, and then it adds it up to put it in a column over here. And then it adds all of that up, and then I can see, okay, I spent $22,000 in expenses on my business. And then same thing with the income. I've made a few columns here to kind of give me an idea of like, oh, okay, looks like, this month I had way more expenses than I had income. And it kind of gives you a little bit of a snapshot of your business. And then this over here is just profit and loss. So this just tells me how many expenses that I had in this month, how much revenue that I brought in. And then this last column tells me like, that's how much money I actually made after expenses and all that stuff. So hopefully that is helpful. It gives you some ideas and maybe makes your tax season a little less stressful this year.